Ryan had not known time for 15,000 years. When he first closed his eyes, the world was full of life, full of humans, full of sounds he could recognize. Cities buzzed with voices. Rivers ran through towns, and animals roamed freely in forests nearby. But when he awoke, the world had changed so completely that it felt like stepping into a dream he did not belong to. The first thing he noticed was the sky. It was not the blue sky he remembered. Instead, it was a pale shade of green with streaks of red, as if the clouds themselves had learned to glow. Strange constellations moved slowly across the sky, different from the stars he had memorized in his youth. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, thinking he must be dreaming. Yet the air smelled real, though heavy with the scent of wet earth and old leaves. Ryan rose to his feet and looked around. The city he had known was gone. Where once there had been streets filled with people, now there were broken towers and bent metal. Trees had grown through windows and vines crawled across walls that had once shined in the sunlight. The ground beneath him was cracked and moss-covered stones that had once been smooth. A cold wind whispered through empty streets, carrying the memory of a life long forgotten. He took a step forward, then another, trying to remember what had happened. How could 15,000 years pass so quickly for the world, and yet leave him untouched? He remembered the scientists who had prepared him for a long sleep, the machines that had closed his eyes, and the final moment when he had thought he would awaken to the same world he had known. But now that world was gone. Ryan walked carefully, his eyes scanning every corner. Shadows moved strangely in the distance. Not like humans, not like animals he remembered, but something alive, something that watched him. Giant birds with silver feathers flew over the broken buildings, their cries echoing through empty streets. Small creatures with glowing eyes peeked from behind walls and collapsed towers. They were curious but cautious, as if they knew he was different, as if he carried a memory they had never known. He reached the edge of what had once been a great plaza. Statues lay broken on the ground, faces worn by time and weather. He touched one carefully. The stone was cold and rough, but there was something familiar in the shape. Humans had made these. Humans had walked here. But now there was no one to see them, no one to remember them. He felt a sharp ache in his chest. 15,000 years had erased everything he knew. Ryan wandered deeper into the city. He passed buildings that had been libraries, schools, and homes. Doors hung from broken hinges, papers fluttered in the wind, and objects half buried in dirt hinted at a life he could no longer reach. He saw a bicycle, rusted and bent, lying on the side of a cracked street. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. It felt strange, foreign, like a relic from another world. As he moved on, he discovered a large building that still stood tall, its walls covered in green vines. A symbol above the entrance was almost invisible, but Ryan recognized it. It was a symbol of knowledge, a place where humans had once kept their stories, their history. A library. His heart leapt. Perhaps here he could find answers. Perhaps here he could find proof that humans had truly existed. Inside, the library was dark and dust filled the air. Sunlight barely reached through the broken windows. Ryan moved carefully, stepping over broken tables and scattered books. The shelves were filled with scrolls and tablets, many crumbled to dust. He picked up a tablet with strange markings and ran his fingers over it. The words were faded, almost impossible to read, but the pictures told stories. Humans were there, but they were no longer rulers of the world. They were legends, myths, creatures remembered in stories by beings that had survived them. Ryan sat on the floor, trying to process everything. His mind raced. How had humans disappeared so completely? What had happened in 15,000 years to make him the only witness? He remembered the scientist's words before he slept. Promises that humans would thrive, that they would reach new heights. But now he could see the truth. Humanity had faded and the world had moved on without them. Night fell quickly, faster than he remembered. The pale green sky darkened into strange shades, and the stars above seemed to hum softly. Ryan built a small fire in the library, careful not to destroy the fragile building. He watched the flames flicker and thought about what he had seen that day. He had walked through streets where no one lived, touched objects that carried memories, and felt a loneliness that was almost physical. He was the last witness to a world that had been forgotten. As the fire crackled, Ryan made a plan. He could not stay in the library forever. He needed to explore, to understand this new world, to learn why humans had vanished. Perhaps if he searched carefully, he could find traces, signs, or even other survivors. He had to believe that humans had not vanished completely, that somewhere, some way, their stories could survive. Morning came, slowly and quietly. Ryan stepped outside and looked at the city again. Light reflected off broken glass and twisted metal, painting the ruins in gold and orange. Birds flew across the sky, their silver feathers shimmering. Ryan took a deep breath. He would walk these streets, climb these towers, and travel beyond this city. He had questions and the world had answers, but he would have to find them. He started walking toward the outskirts, where forests had begun to reclaim the land. Trees grew tall and thick, their roots breaking through roads and walls. Strange flowers glowed softly in the early light. Small creatures watched him carefully, their eyes shining with curiosity. He noticed how the wind moved differently here, how the air was fresh yet carried a hint of something unknown. Ryan realized that this world was alive, but alive in a way he could not yet understand. Humans had shaped it once, but they were gone now, and life had adapted. The animals, the plants, even the sky had changed. He wondered if humans had ever been ready for this world, or if their time had simply passed too quickly. By midday, he reached a river that cut through the land. Water flowed freely, untouched by human hands. Fish with shining scales leapt from the surface, and strange plants grew along the banks. Ryan knelt and touched the water. It was cool and real. He drank, feeling strength return to his body. For the first time since he had awoken, he felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this world was not entirely lost. Maybe humans had become myths, but life itself was still here. As he continued along the river, Ryan found small remnants of human life, tools, carved stones, and faint signs of buildings. But they were all broken, abandoned, and worn by time. He realized that even in myth, humans had left a mark. That mark was small, fragile, but it was proof that they had existed, and if he could find more, perhaps he could piece together the story of what had happened. Ryan walked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. He climbed a small hill and looked back at the city. From here it looked tiny, almost like a memory rather than a place. He thought about the humans who had lived there, about the scientists, families, children, and elders. 15,000 years had passed and their world had changed completely, but the memory remained hidden in stones, trees, and water. He camped on the hill that night, staring at the stars. For the first time, he did not feel completely alone. Though humans were gone, life persisted, and the world still held stories waiting to be discovered. Ryan made a promise to himself. He would explore this new world, uncover its secrets, and perhaps in some way, bring the story of humanity back from myth to memory. And with that thought, he drifted into a light sleep, ready for the journey that awaited him. When Ryan woke, the pale green sky was already brightening with soft sunlight. The world seemed quieter than before, as if the night had whispered secrets only the wind could understand. He stretched and looked around. The hill where he had camped gave him a clear view of the vast forest ahead. Trees stretched endlessly, their leaves glimmering in strange colors, and winding rivers cut through the land like silver ribbons. Ryan took a deep breath and began walking toward the forest. Each step brought new sounds and sights he had never seen. Strange flowers opened as he passed, their petals glowing faintly. Small creatures darted between trees, disappearing before he could get a good look. Some had wings, some had long tails, and all had eyes that seemed to shine with intelligence. Ryan could feel that he was being watched, but he did not feel fear. Instead, a strange curiosity filled him. As he moved deeper into the forest, he noticed signs of structures hidden among the trees. Wooden platforms, broken ladders, and carved stones suggested that someone or something had built here long ago. The forest was alive, but it had history. The creatures here had shaped it, and perhaps they held answers about what had happened to humans. Ryan paused beside a small stream and knelt to drink. The water was cool and clear. As he looked into it, he saw a reflection of himself, older, tired, but determined. He remembered the tablet he had found in the ruined library, the one that told stories of humans as myths. He wondered, had these creatures been the ones to replace humans, or had they always been here, hidden in the corners of the world? He had not walked far when he heard a sound that made him freeze, a soft rustling, almost like the wind moving through leaves, but closer, deliberate. Ryan crouched behind a large tree and peered out. There, not 20 feet away, was a creature unlike any he had ever seen. It was tall, with smooth skin that shimmered in shades of green and gold. Its eyes were large and golden, and its hands had long, delicate fingers. The creature did not run. It tilted its head and stared at Ryan with curiosity. Ryan held his breath, unsure if it was friendly or dangerous. Slowly, he raised a hand in greeting. To his surprise, the creature did the same, a gesture of acknowledgement. Ryan stepped forward carefully. "Hello," he said, his voice soft. I am Ryan. I have been asleep a very long time. I am alone." The creature did not speak, at least not with words he could understand, but it made a sound, low and melodic, almost like a song. Then it gestured toward the forest, as if inviting him to follow. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then decided to trust it. He followed the creature through winding paths, over fallen logs, and under thick branches. The forest seemed to open before them, revealing hidden glades filled with light. In one glade, Ryan saw others, creatures similar to the first, some small, some large, all moving gracefully among the trees. They did not seem afraid of him, only curious. Ryan realized that he was the first human they had seen in thousands of years. The leader, the first creature, led him to a large tree with a hollow trunk. Inside, carvings covered the walls. Symbols, shapes, and scenes told a story. Ryan studied them carefully. They showed humans living long ago, building cities and creating machines. Then the carvings shifted. Humans were shown as fading figures, leaving the world behind, while creatures like the ones he was seeing now took their place. Ryan felt a mixture of sadness and wonder. Humanity had disappeared, yes, but life had not stopped. Something new had risen. The carvings suggested these creatures were not enemies. They were guardians of the world that humans had once dominated. They had watched, learned, and adapted. The leader approached Ryan and touched his shoulder gently. Ryan felt a strange warmth spread through him. It was as if the creature understood his confusion, his grief, and his hope all at once. Though they could not speak the same language, Ryan felt that a bond had begun, a silent agreement that he was welcome here, at least for now. Over the next hours, Ryan explored the glade with the creatures. They showed him plants with healing properties, fruits that glowed softly and tasted sweet, and streams filled with sparkling fish. He learned quickly that the creatures were intelligent, careful, and peaceful. They lived in harmony with the forest and respected every living thing. Ryan marveled at their knowledge. Humans had created machines, yes, but these creatures had created a world that thrived without harming it. By late afternoon, Ryan felt tired. The creatures guided him to a small clearing where he could rest. As he lay down on soft moss, he thought about what he had learned. Humanity had become a myth because time had moved on without them. But perhaps myths were not meant to vanish completely. Perhaps they lived on in memory, in carvings, in stories whispered by those who came after. As he slept, Ryan dreamed of the past. He saw cities filled with humans, machines that soared through the sky, and families walking along streets now gone. He saw himself as a young man before the sleep, before the world changed. And then he saw the creatures, watching, waiting, learning from the humans, and finally taking their place. When he woke, the dream lingered in his mind, clearer than the carvings he had seen. The next day, Ryan learned that the creatures were called the Guardians. They had names for each other, sounds that Ryan could not yet pronounce, but he understood their meaning. They were protectors of the land, the water, and the life that remained. They were aware of humans as legends, and some even spoke of curiosity about them. Why did humans leave? Ryan asked one of the smaller guardians, using gestures and simple words. The creature made a soft sound, then pointed to the carvings. Ryan understood. Some things were not fully known, even to them. Despite this, he felt hope. If the Guardians remembered humans even as myths, then humanity's story had not ended entirely. He could explore, learn, and perhaps find other clues hidden in the world. With the Guardians' help, he might even discover why humans had vanished. As days passed, Ryan traveled with the Guardians. He climbed cliffs, crossed rivers, and wandered through forests that seemed endless. Each new place held secrets, ancient ruins half swallowed by nature, strange glowing plants, and animals that defied description. Sometimes he would stumble upon remnants of human civilization, a broken wheel, a stone tablet, or a fragment of a building. Each find reminded him that humans had truly existed, and that their story was waiting to be rediscovered. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the leader guardian brought Ryan to a hill overlooking a valley. In the distance, he saw what looked like a mountain, but its surface shimmered in a way he could not explain. Strange lights moved across it, almost like rivers of energy. The Guardian made a gesture toward it, then looked at Ryan as if to say, "That is where answers lie." Ryan felt a thrill of excitement and fear. This mountain, whatever it was, might hold the key to understanding humanity's disappearance, but it was far and the journey would be difficult. He would have to travel alone at times, face unknown dangers, and rely on his wits and courage. The Guardians could guide him only so far. Beyond that, the world belonged to its own rules. That night, Ryan camped on the hill with the smaller Guardians. They sat in silence, watching the stars appear in the sky. The wind carried whispers of the forest, the sound of moving rivers, and the faint cries of creatures in the distance. Ryan thought about the first Guardians he had met and how they had accepted him. Somehow, in this strange new world, he was beginning to feel a sense of belonging, a sense that he could still make a difference. Before sleeping, he made a decision. He would journey to the shimmering mountain. He would uncover the secrets of the Guardians, of the land, and of the humans who had vanished. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would find a way to bring the story of humanity back from myth to memory. As he closed his eyes, Ryan felt a calm determination. The forest around him was alive. The Guardians watched over him, and the path ahead was uncertain but full of promise. 15,000 years of sleep had given him a second chance, a chance to witness the world, to learn its secrets, and to understand what had become of the humans. Ryan drifted into sleep, the moon rising high above the trees. The shimmering mountain waited. The Guardians watched, and the story of humanity, though nearly forgotten, was about to begin again in the hands of one man who had survived time itself. Ryan woke before dawn. The forest was quiet, bathed in a pale green light that filtered through the thick canopy. The smaller Guardians stirred nearby, making soft sounds that seemed like greetings. The leader Guardian had already begun walking toward the path leading out of the glade. Ryan quickly gathered his few belongings, small tools, a notebook and a water pouch, and followed. Today marked the beginning of the long journey to the shimmering mountain. The forest changed as they moved. Trees grew taller and denser, their roots twisting like giant snakes across the ground. Strange vines hung from branches, some glowing faintly. Ryan had to duck and step carefully to avoid tripping. The air smelled of wet earth and flowers he could not name. Birds with iridescent feathers flew above, while tiny creatures zipped past him, curious but cautious. The Guardians moved with ease, climbing, jumping, and gliding through the forest as if it were their home. Because it was. Ryan tried to match their pace, but he quickly realized that his human body was slower. He stumbled over roots and rocks, scraped his hands against bark, and felt sweat trickle down his back. Yet despite the difficulty, he felt excitement. Each step brought him closer to the mountain and to answers about what had happened to humanity. By midday, they reached a wide river. Its water shimmered with colors he had never seen, reflecting the strange sky above. Ryan knelt to drink and watched fish with translucent bodies swim beneath the surface. The leader Guardian gestured toward a fallen log, forming a natural bridge. Ryan hesitated. The log was wide but slick with moss, and the river below looked deep. He took a deep breath, focused on the log, and stepped carefully. Halfway across, his foot slipped. He lost balance, but a glowing hand reached out and steadied him. The smaller Guardian had followed him and ensured he did not fall. Ryan smiled, grateful. Even though he was alone as a human, he was not entirely without allies. After crossing the river, the forest began to thin. Hills rose ahead and the path became steeper. Ryan noticed that the trees here were older, taller, with trunks wider than any he had seen before. Their bark was smooth, almost metallic in texture, and the leaves shimmered faintly in the sunlight. He felt a sense of awe and humility. This forest had survived the absence of humans, and it had grown stronger without them. By late afternoon, Ryan and the Guardians reached a clearing on a high hill. From here he could see the shimmering mountain clearly. It rose far above the forest, its surface reflecting light in waves of gold, silver, and green. Strange mist drifted along its slopes and glowing rivers ran down its sides. It was beautiful and mysterious, like a giant jewel planted in the middle of the world. Ryan's heart raced. This mountain held the answers he sought. Perhaps the truth about humanity's disappearance. Perhaps clues about what had become of the Guardians. perhaps even knowledge about the forces that shaped this world after humans were gone. He could not wait to climb it. The leader guardian approached him and touched his shoulder gently. Then it gestured toward the mountain and pointed to the rising sun. Ryan understood he had to be careful. The journey would be long and the climb would be difficult. But he felt ready. For the first time since awakening, he felt a spark of courage stronger than fear. The first part of the climb was steep but manageable. Ryan moved slowly, resting often. The guardians guided him along safe paths, pointing out hidden dangers, loose rocks, thin ledges, and slippery moss. He learned quickly to watch the ground, to trust the instincts the guardians shared, and to move with patience. Each step revealed new wonders. Plants that glowed in the dim light, strange birds that sang in soft melodies, and pools of crystal-clear water reflecting the strange sky above. At night, they camped on a ledge overlooking a vast valley. The moon rose slowly, casting silver light across the land. Ryan lay on the soft moss, gazing at the mountain above. Its shimmering slopes seemed to promise secrets, but also trials. He thought about humanity, about the cities, the machines, and the people who had once walked this world. He wondered if any humans had survived, or if the myth had become the only memory left. The next morning, the climb grew harder. The slopes became steeper and the wind stronger. Strange sounds echoed from the mountain, low hums, distant crashes, and soft whispers that seemed almost like voices. Ryan was unsure if the sounds came from the mountain itself or from creatures hidden on its slopes. The guardians moved with ease, guiding him along safe paths, but he realized that soon he would have to climb alone. By midday, they reached a narrow ridge. One wrong step could mean a long fall. Ryan's legs shook, but he pressed on. Suddenly he noticed markings on the rocks, ancient symbols that glowed faintly. He recognized some from the tablet in the ruined library and from the carvings in the glade. Humans had been here long ago. Perhaps they had even attempted to climb the mountain themselves. His heart quickened. The signs confirmed what he had begun to suspect. This mountain held answers about humans, perhaps the key to understanding their disappearance. As he moved along the ridge, a sudden wind swept across the mountain, nearly knocking him off balance. He grabbed onto a jagged rock and held tight. Below, the valley stretched endlessly, forests and rivers painted in strange colors. He could see no sign of other humans, only hints of life in the distance, creatures that seemed to belong to the world after humans. The wind carried whispers, almost as if the mountain itself was speaking to him. By late afternoon, Ryan reached a plateau halfway up the mountain. Strange plants grew here, glowing faintly in patterns that looked almost like writing. Pools of water reflected the light of the setting sun. The guardian stopped with him. The leader touched his shoulder and made a sound, low and melodic, as if to say, "This is as far as we go. Beyond this point, you must continue alone." Ryan nodded, understanding. He felt both fear and excitement. The climb ahead would be difficult, but he was determined. He thanked the guardian silently, knowing they had guided him safely this far. With a final glance at the plateau, he began the next part of the journey alone. The path became narrower and more treacherous. Rocks jutted out at sharp angles, and small avalanches of loose stones forced him to be careful with every step. The air grew thinner, colder, and harder to breathe, yet he pressed on, driven by the need to uncover the truth. He thought of humans, the civilizations lost to time, and the guardians who had replaced them. He realized that he carried their memory and with it a responsibility. As night fell, Ryan found a small cave to rest. Inside, the walls glimmered with crystals that reflected the faint light from outside. He lit a small fire and ate what little food he had. The wind howled outside, but the cave sheltered him. As he lay down, he thought about what awaited him higher up. He felt a strange mix of fear, curiosity, and hope. The mountain was alive, full of secrets and perhaps even dangers, but he was ready. During the night, he dreamed again. In his dream, he saw humans climbing the mountain long ago. They carried tools and scrolls, leaving signs behind. He saw storms and avalanches, struggles and determination. Then the humans disappeared from the dream, leaving only glowing markings and faint echoes of their presence. Ryan woke with a start, understanding that the mountain had witnessed the last days of humanity and held the memory of those who had vanished. The next morning, Ryan continued upward. The slope grew almost vertical in places, and he had to use both hands and feet to climb. Strange plants clung to the rocks, glowing with soft light. Pools of water reflected the sky in colors he could not name. He realized that the mountain was not just a place but a living memory of the world that had once been. By midday, he reached a narrow ledge with a view that took his breath away. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, rivers shining like silver threads. Above, the summit glimmered in sunlight, partially hidden by clouds. Ryan felt small but determined. He knew he had to continue. The answers he sought were near, and he would not turn back. As he rested on the ledge, he noticed movement ahead, shadows shifting along the rocks. Creatures unlike any he had seen before darted along the slopes. They seemed aware of him, watching silently. Ryan realized that the mountain had guardians of its own, protectors who had survived long after humans were gone. He felt a shiver knowing the journey ahead would not be easy. Yet, despite the dangers, Ryan felt hope. He had traveled far, learned from the guardians of the forest, and survived the mountain's lower slopes. Higher up, the shimmering summit awaited, full of secrets, memories, and perhaps the truth about humanity itself. With a deep breath, he stood, tightened his pack, and continued upward, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Ryan pressed onward. The shimmering mountain rose before him like a giant sentinel, its slopes twisting into clouds and sunlight. Each step grew harder. Rocks were sharp, loose, and slick with dew. The air thinned, making his breathing heavier. He could feel fatigue in every muscle, but determination pushed him forward. Somewhere above, he knew, were answers about humanity, the guardians, and perhaps even his own purpose. As he climbed higher, the glow of the mountain became stronger. Pools of water scattered across jagged ledges reflected colors he could not name. Gold, silver, green, and blue, all moving like liquid light. Some pools seemed warm to the touch, as if the mountain itself carried energy. Ryan knelt by one, cupped his hands, and drank. The water tasted pure and fresh, filling him with renewed strength. Suddenly, a sound echoed across the rocks. A low, humming vibration. Ryan froze. The mountain seemed alive, as if it were aware of his presence. He looked around. Shadows shifted along the rocks, moving in ways that suggested life. Not creatures he had seen before, but guardians of the mountain itself. Their eyes glowed faintly, and they moved with silent precision, observing him. Ryan took a deep breath. He had faced the forest, rivers, cliffs, and wild creatures. Now he faced the mountain itself. Slowly, carefully, he moved forward. His hands gripped rocks, his feet found narrow ledges, and he climbed inch by inch. Every movement required attention, focus, and patience. One misstep could mean disaster, but he did not falter. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and began to dip toward the horizon. The mountain test seemed endless. Ryan began to notice signs along the way. Markings carved into stone, faint traces of human presence. Ancient tools, worn and rusted, lay half-buried in crevices. Symbols glowed faintly, resembling the carvings he had seen in the forest glade and the library long ago. Humans had come here before him, seeking answers or perhaps attempting the climb. Their journey had ended somewhere above, and their memory lingered in the mountain. By evening, Ryan reached a high ledge overlooking a narrow canyon. The wind blew fiercely, carrying the scent of minerals and strange flowers that grew on the rocks. He paused to rest, leaning against a glowing stone. As he caught his breath, he noticed movement far below, shapes shifting in the canyon shadows. They were creatures, perhaps the mountain's own guardians. Their forms were tall and thin, with limbs that moved gracefully along the canyon walls. Ryan realized they were aware of him. He watched carefully. The creatures did not attack, but their gaze was heavy, measuring him, testing him. Ryan felt a chill of caution, but also a thrill. The mountain was not just a place, it was alive, a living record of the world after humans. These guardians had protected its secrets for centuries, perhaps millennia, and now Ryan had come to uncover what humans had left behind. Night fell quickly. Ryan found shelter in a small cave nestled into the mountainside. Inside, the walls shimmered faintly with crystal formations. Water dripped from above, creating soft echoes. He lit a small fire and ate the rations he carried. As he rested, he thought about humanity, about the cities, the people, the machines, and the myths. 15,000 years had erased much of their memory, but fragments remained in places like this mountain. Ryan realized he was piecing together a story, one that had been lost for millennia. Sleep came slowly. In his dreams, Ryan saw humans climbing the mountain long ago. They carried scrolls, maps, and tools, leaving traces of their presence. They struggled, endured storms, and left messages carved into rocks. Then in the dream, the humans vanished. Creatures of the forest appeared, learning, observing, and adapting. The mountain absorbed their memory, becoming a living chronicle of what had once been. When Ryan awoke, he understood that the mountain held knowledge, and knowledge was power. The next morning, he resumed the climb. The path became narrower, steeper, and more dangerous. Loose rocks threatened to slide beneath his feet, and sudden gusts of wind tested his balance. He moved carefully, using both hands and feet and paying attention to every crevice and ledge. The pools of shimmering water glowed brighter as he climbed higher, as if guiding him toward something important. By midday, Ryan reached a plateau dotted with strange stone pillars. Symbols were etched into each pillar, glowing softly. He examined them closely. The symbols told a story of humans long ago, of their rise, their achievements, and their sudden disappearance. Humans had been brilliant, creative, and strong, but something had caused them to vanish. The carvings hinted at a choice, a great event that reshaped the world and allowed new life, including the Guardians, to flourish. Ryan spent hours studying the pillars, tracing the symbols with his fingers. He realized that humans had left messages, not just for each other, but for anyone who might come after. The mountain had preserved their memory, their wisdom, and their warning. Ryan felt a sense of connection, as if the humans of the past were speaking to him across time. He knew he had to continue upward, to find the heart of the mountain where the final answers awaited. As afternoon turned to evening, the mountain slopes grew almost vertical. Ryan climbed carefully, using cracks and ledges to hold himself. He noticed that the air had grown thin, and his chest burned with every breath. Yet he pressed on, driven by curiosity and determination. The shimmering summit was close, and he could feel the energy of the mountain stronger here. It pulsed beneath his hands and feet, almost like a heartbeat. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed in his mind. It was not words, but feelings, images of humans, guardians, and the world itself. Ryan understood that the mountain communicated, sharing visions of the past and the present. He saw humans building cities, creating machines, and reaching for knowledge. Then he saw the forests growing, the guardians rising, and life adapting to a world without humans. The vision left him breathless. The mountain had remembered everything. Night fell, and Ryan found another small cave for shelter. The wind howled outside, carrying whispers and echoes of the past. He lay on the soft ground, staring at the glowing crystals embedded in the cave walls. He realized that the journey was more than a climb. It was a lesson. Humanity had vanished, but life endured. Knowledge persisted. Memory survived in the mountain, in the guardians, and now in him. The following morning, Ryan resumed his final ascent. The climb became more treacherous. Rocks jutted sharply, and strong gusts threatened to throw him off balance. But he was careful, deliberate, and determined. Every step brought him closer to the summit, and to the truth humanity had left behind. By midday, he reached a narrow ledge that opened onto a hidden valley near the top. Strange plants grew here, glowing in colors he could not name. Small pools of water reflected the sky in shimmering patterns. The valley seemed untouched by time, a preserved world within the mountain. Ryan walked carefully, realizing that he had discovered something extraordinary, a place where humans, guardians, and nature had intersected long ago. At the center of the valley, he saw it, a stone structure carved into the mountain itself. It was covered in symbols and carvings, glowing faintly in the light. Ryan approached, feeling a mix of awe and reverence. The structure seemed to hold the secrets of humanity, the history of the guardians, and the wisdom of the mountain itself. He reached out to touch it, feeling a warmth spread through his hands. The mountain was alive, and it had waited for someone to understand its story. Ryan spent hours exploring the structure. He traced symbols, studied carvings, and pieced together the story of humanity's rise and fall. Humans had been brilliant, but their time was finite. They had vanished not because of failure, but because the world had changed in ways they could not control. The Guardians had risen to preserve life, to protect the land, and to ensure that the lessons of humanity were not lost. Ryan understood that he was now part of this story, a bridge between the past and the present, between humans and the new life that had grown in their absence. As night fell, Ryan camped in the hidden valley. The stars above shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, and the mountain hummed softly beneath him. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had uncovered a great truth. Humanity had vanished, but their memory lived on, in the mountain, in the guardians, and now in him. Rian closed his eyes, ready for the final part of his journey. The summit awaited, and with it the ultimate answers about humanity, the world, and his place within it. 15,000 years of sleep had left him alone at first, but now he understood. He was never truly alone. The world, its life, and its memory were with him, guiding him toward the truth. Rian woke before dawn. The hidden valley was quiet, bathed in the faint glow of crystal reflections. The air was crisp, and the soft hum of the mountain resonated through the ground beneath him. Today he would reach the summit, the highest point of the shimmering mountain where the ultimate secrets of humanity awaited. He packed his small belongings and took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement, fear, and determination. The climb from the valley was steep and treacherous. Jagged rocks cut into his hands and loose stones shifted underfoot. He moved slowly, carefully testing each step. The mountain seemed alive, guiding him with glowing paths and subtle vibrations beneath his feet. Pools of water reflected light in ever-changing patterns as if showing him the path forward. Rian realized that the mountain itself was teaching him patience, focus, and respect for the life that endured in its presence. Hours passed. The sun rose high above the peaks, casting golden light across the slopes. Rian could see distant forests, winding rivers, and the ruins of cities far below. The world stretched endlessly, vast and beautiful, a testament to the life that had survived the disappearance of humans. Birds with shimmering feathers soared across the skies, and strange creatures moved gracefully along cliffs and ledges. Each sight reminded Rian that the world had adapted, that life had continued, and that humans had been only one part of its story. By midday, he reached a narrow ridge. The wind howled fiercely, threatening to throw him off balance. He held tightly to the rocks, moving inch by inch. Below, he saw deep chasms and jagged cliffs, but above, the summit glimmered in the sunlight. Pools of glowing water reflected the sky, and crystals embedded in the rock shimmered like stars. The mountain seemed to pulse, alive with memory, and Rian felt a connection stronger than anything he had known. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the ridge. Rian froze, his heart racing. From the rocks above, a creature emerged, tall, thin, with luminous eyes and long, delicate limbs. It was unlike the guardians from the forest. This creature moved with precision and purpose, watching him silently. Rian understood instinctively that it was a guardian of the mountain itself, protecting its secrets and testing those who dared to climb. He stepped forward slowly, showing no aggression. The creature made a soft sound, melodic and low, and then stepped aside, allowing him to continue. Rian realized that this was a final test, an acknowledgement that he was worthy to witness what lay at the summit. He nodded silently, understanding that respect and courage were as important as strength and endurance. The final climb was the hardest. Rocks were sharp and loose, and the slope grew nearly vertical in places. Rian used every ounce of his strength, gripping cracks in the stone, stepping carefully on ledges, and moving steadily upward. His muscles ached, his lungs burned, but he pressed on. Every step brought him closer to the summit and closer to the truth he had sought for so long. At last, as the sun began to set, he reached the summit. The view took his breath away. The world stretched endlessly below him. Forests, rivers, ruins of cities, and distant mountains shimmering in strange light. But the summit itself held the greatest wonder, a circular platform of smooth stone, embedded with glowing symbols and crystal inlays, stretched before him. Pools of water reflected the sky, and energy pulsed from the stones beneath his feet. This place felt sacred, a record of all that had come before. Rian approached the center of the platform. Symbols on the stones glowed brighter as he neared, and images appeared in the water pools. He saw humans, their cities, machines, and inventions. He saw the guardians rising, forests growing, and life adapting to a world without humans. The mountain revealed everything: the rise, the achievements, and the disappearance of humanity. Humans had vanished not because of weakness, but because the world had changed. They had reached a limit, and life had moved forward without them. The visions became clearer. Rian saw humans making a choice long ago. To preserve life, to protect the future, they had stepped aside. Perhaps they had left the world in sleep, leaving it for others to inherit. The mountain had recorded their decision, their wisdom, and their hope that life would continue. He understood then that humanity had not failed. It had made a sacrifice ensuring the survival of the world itself. Ryan knelt beside a glowing pool. He saw a reflection of himself, not just as a man, but as part of a continuum. Humans had created, dreamed, and built, and though they had vanished, their story persisted. The mountain, the guardians, and now he himself were witnesses. He realized he carried responsibility, not just to understand the past, but to honor it. To ensure that humanity's story, though forgotten by the world, would not be lost entirely. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the mountain pulsed softly beneath him. A sense of calm and understanding filled Ryan. He had journeyed through forests, rivers, and cliffs. He had met the first guardians, learned their ways, and now stood at the heart of the mountain witnessing the truth of humanity. The journey had been difficult, but it had been necessary. Every challenge, every obstacle, had prepared him to understand and respect the world that remained. Night fell, and stars appeared in the strange sky. Ryan lay on the stone platform gazing upward. He could feel the pulse of the mountain, the memory of humans, and the presence of life all around him. For the first time in 15,000 years, he felt complete. Humanity had become a myth, yes, but myths were not nothing. They carried lessons, hope, and memory. And now Ryan had the chance to carry that story forward. He spent the night at the summit listening to the wind, watching the stars, and reflecting on all he had learned. He thought about the forests, the rivers, the guardians, and the creatures that had replaced humans. Life had adapted, grown, and thrived, but he was the bridge between the past and present. He understood that he could explore, teach, and perhaps even guide the new life that had risen in humanity's absence. Morning came slowly. The first light touched the summit, making the crystals shimmer like diamonds. Ryan stood, feeling the energy of the mountain flow through him. He knew that the journey down would be easier physically, but the knowledge he carried now made it heavier in another way. He had seen the truth, and with it came responsibility. He could not ignore the past. Humanity's story had to be remembered, shared, and honored. He began descending carefully, following paths that were safer but still challenging. As he moved, he saw creatures from the forest watching him from ledges, silently acknowledging his journey. He realized that the guardians had trusted him, and that the mountain itself had recognized his courage. He felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the past, but to the life that continued around him. By midday, Ryan reached the hidden valley once more. The glow of the plants, the pools of water, and the soft hum of the mountain welcomed him back. He paused, remembering the climb, the summit, and the visions of humanity. He had seen the truth. Humans had created, dreamed, and sacrificed for the future. The world had moved on, but the story remained, waiting for someone to remember. Ryan spent days descending the mountain, taking time to study the glowing plants, the crystal pools, and the carvings left by humans and guardians alike. He realized that life in all its forms was connected. Humans had vanished, yes, but their memory lived on in the mountain, in the guardians, and in him. He understood that the future depended not just on remembering, but on learning from the past. When he finally reached the forest, he was greeted by the first guardians he had met. They made soft, melodic sounds welcoming him back. Ryan smiled and bowed slightly, a gesture of gratitude. He had returned, not just as a survivor, but as a witness, a keeper of memory, and a bridge between what had been and what would be. Ryan knew his journey was not over. There were still forests to explore, ruins to uncover, and creatures to meet. But he also knew that he carried a responsibility now, the responsibility to honor humanity, to learn from the past, and to ensure that myths became stories that could guide the future. 15,000 years of sleep had left him alone, but awakening had given him purpose. As he walked through the forest, the sun rising behind him, Ryan felt hope. Humanity had become a myth, yes, but myths were not forgotten. They waited for someone to remember. And now he would carry their story forward. He would ensure that humans, their dreams, and their lessons were never truly lost. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the memory of the past, the pulse of the mountain, and the promise of the future. Ryan smiled, knowing that he was ready. The world had changed, life had survived, and the story of humanity, though long forgotten, had found its witness once more, and with each step, he moved forward toward the forests, the rivers, the unknown, and toward the future that humans had once dreamed of, leaving a path for others to follow, remember, and carry on.